September 1944, Valmontone, province of Rome, Italy. The smell of burnt bread mixed with gunpowder still hanging in the morning air. I hear the American jeeps before I see them. Engines rumbling like distant thunder climbing up the dirt road. My hands shake holding my dirty apron. I'm Lucia Moretti, 37 years old, mother of 3, or maybe 2 now. I haven't known for 8 months. Today I asked the priest again if God hears the prayers of mothers who've lost faith. He had no answer. Neither do I. If you want to know how this impossible search ends, hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like and drop a comment telling me, would you have kept searching? Let's go. I never planned to be a hero. I planned to bake bread, raise my children, and die old in the same house where I was born. War doesn't care about plans. When the Germans retreated north through Valmontone in June, they took everything: food, horses, young men. They took my Marco, 16 years old, tall for his age, which made him look older. Old enough to carry ammunition, they said. Old enough to dig trenches, not old enough to say no. My husband Giuseppe tried to hide him in the cellar behind the wine barrels. The Feldgendarmerie found him in 11 minutes. I counted. I stood in our doorway and counted every second while they dragged my son into a truck with 19 other boys from our village. Giuseppe hasn't spoken more than 10 words since that day. The contrast was grotesque. We were eating potato peels and chicory root. The German officers requisitioned Signora Bertelli's entire storehouse: 40 wheels of pecorino, 200 kilos of flour, 60 bottles of olive oil. They held a feast in the piazza the night before they left. We could smell roasted meat from our windows while our children cried from hunger. I remember every detail. The accordion music, the laughter, the clink of stolen wine glasses, and the silence afterward when the trucks drove north into the darkness, carrying our sons. The Allies liberated Rome on June 4, 1944. We heard it on the priest's hidden radio. Rome was 35 kilometers south. We were nothing. A farming village of 800 souls that nobody remembered until they needed our grain, or our sons. The Americans didn't reach us until mid-June. By then, the Gothic line was forming 200 kilometers north. Marco was somewhere between here and there, if he was anywhere at all. I started walking north the next day. Giuseppe grabbed my wrist. Lucia, no. The roads are filled with soldiers I know. Mines, artillery. The Tedeschi are still fighting. I know. You'll die. I pulled my wrist free. Then I'll die looking. The first week I made it 17 kilometers. I walked along Via Casalina, the main highway north, staying in the ditches when military convoys passed. American trucks mostly. 2.5-ton GMC CKWs carrying supplies north, carrying wounded south. The soldiers would shout at me in English I couldn't understand, but their gestures were clear. Get off the road. Too dangerous. I kept walking. In the village of Anagni, I met Signora Caruso. Her son Tommaso had been taken the same day as Marco, in the same truck. She was walking north too. We didn't discuss it. We just started walking together. 2 mothers. 2 sets of worn shoes. 1 fading photograph each, wrapped in cloth to protect it from rain. We asked everyone: displaced persons trudging south with carts and bundles, partisans with red scarves and old rifles, American military police at checkpoints. Nobody had seen our sons. Nobody had seen anything except destruction and retreat, but we kept asking. The American soldiers were strange, young, impossibly young, with clean uniforms and cigarettes they handed out like candy. They called us ma'am, even though we looked like scarecrows. One corporal from Texas, he told me through a translator, gave me a full canteen and a chocolate bar. I tried to refuse. He insisted. For your journey, ma'am. I got a mother back home. She'd want someone to help you. I cried. I couldn't help it. He looked terrified. The contrast was everywhere. These Americans had everything. Food, fuel, medicine, vehicles. We had nothing. Yet they shared. The German officers had taken everything and shared nothing, not even mercy. By early July, Signora Caruso and I had reached Frosinone, 45 kilometers north of Valmontone. The city was rubble. Allied bombers had hit it repeatedly in May because of the railway junction. Entire blocks reduced to broken concrete and twisted metal. The smell of death still hung in the summer heat. We found a displaced persons camp run by the Allied military government. Hundreds of people living in tents, waiting for somewhere to go, waiting for someone to find them, waiting for news that never came. I showed Marco's photograph to everyone. A lieutenant from Brooklyn looked at it carefully. "I'll ask around, ma'am. We're processing a lot of POWs coming down from the north. Germans mostly, but sometimes we find Italian boys pressed into service." "He's 16. "I understand, ma'am. 16 years old." The lieutenant's face softened. "I got a kid brother that age. I'll do what I can." 3 days later, he found me in the camp. My heart stopped when I saw his expression. We found a group of Italian laborers, 32 men. They were working under German supervision near Cassino, building fortifications. When the Germans retreated, they just left them. No food, no transport. American patrols found them walking south last week. "Is Marco—" "I don't know, ma'am, but you should talk to them. They're being held at a processing center in Caserta. I can get you transport." Signora Caruso and I climbed into the back of an American truck the next morning. The ride took 4 hours on bombed-out roads. I counted every minute. I held Marco's photograph so tight the edges cut into my palm. The processing center was a former Italian army barracks. Rows of tents, barbed wire, American MPs with Thompson submachine guns. It looked like a prison. It smelled like a hospital. A captain met us at the gate. "You're the mothers?" "Yes." Lieutenant Romano radioed ahead. "Come with me." He led us through the compound. Hundreds of men sitting in the sun, waiting. Displaced persons, refugees, former forced laborers, suspected collaborators. All waiting to be identified, documented, sent somewhere. We reached a tent. 32 men inside, thin, hollow-eyed, wearing rags that used to be clothes. I searched every face. Marco wasn't there. Neither was Tommaso. But one of the men recognized the photographs. "I know them," he said in a voice like gravel. "We were in the same work group, near Cassino, building tank traps." My legs almost gave out. "Where are they?" "The Germans split our group in August. Half of us sent to Arezzo to work on the Gothic line. The other half stayed at Cassino." "Which group was Marco in?" "Arezzo, signora. I saw him get on the truck." "Was he alive? Was he hurt?" "Alive. Thin, like all of us. But alive." Signora Caruso grabbed my arm. We held each other upright. "Tommaso," she whispered. "Same truck, signora." The captain was already moving. "Arezzo is in Allied hands. We took it last month. I'll make inquiries." I wanted to leave immediately, start walking north again. But the captain insisted we wait. "Ma'am, it's 200 kilometers, through active combat zones. The Gothic line fighting is brutal right now. You'd never make it." So we waited. 2 days became 4. 4 became 7. Every morning I woke up thinking this would be the day. Every night I went to sleep knowing it wasn't. The American soldiers in the camp adopted us. They gave us real food, canned rations, white bread, coffee. One sergeant from Chicago rigged up a cot for each of us in a supply tent. "My mother would kill me if I let you sleep on the ground," he said. They were boys themselves. 18, 19, 20 years old. Thousands of miles from home, fighting someone else's war in someone else's country. Yet they treated us with a kindness I hadn't seen in years. One evening, a private from Ohio showed me a photograph of his mother. "She looks worried all the time now," he said. "Every letter I get, she asks if I'm eating enough, if I'm staying safe, like I'm still 10 years old. That never stops," I told him. "You'll always be 10 years old to her." He smiled. "I hope I get to go home and let her worry in person." "You will." I didn't know if that was true. But mothers say these things. We say them because the alternative is unthinkable. On the 9th day, the captain found me. His face was unreadable. We located the work group from Arezzo. My heart hammered. And 47 Italian laborers. They were released when the Germans abandoned the Gothic line positions. Most scattered. Some stayed together. We found 23 of them. "Marco? The records show a Marco Moretti, age 16, from Valmontone. Is that your son?" I couldn't breathe. "Yes." "Where is he?" "He's at a field hospital near Florence. He collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition when he reached Allied lines. The medics stabilized him. He's recovering." The world tilted. Signora Caruso caught me before I fell. "Tommaso?" she asked. The captain's expression changed. Just slightly. Just enough. "I'm sorry, Signora. Tommaso Caruso died in August. Pneumonia. The Germans provided no medical care. Signora Caruso made no sound. She simply folded, like a puppet with cut strings. I held her while she shook. The contrast was unbearable. My son alive, hers dead. Both 16. Both taken the same day in the same truck. One comes home. One doesn't. What kind of God makes that choice?" The captain gave us a moment. Then, "Mrs. Moretti, I can arrange transport to Florence tomorrow. The hospital is expecting you." "Thank you, ma'am." He hesitated. "Your son has been through hell. Be prepared for that." I was prepared for nothing. How do you prepare to see your child after 8 months of not knowing if he's alive or dead? How do you prepare for the moment between hoping and knowing? That night I couldn't sleep. Signora Caruso lay on the cot next to mine, staring at the tent ceiling. Neither of us spoke. What words exist for this? One mother's prayer answered. One mother's prayer returned unheard. At dawn, a jeep arrived. A young corporal from Pennsylvania was driving. "Ready, ma'am?" I looked at Signora Caruso. "Come with me." "No. Please. He's your son, Lucia. You go. Her voice broke. "I need to go home. I need to tell Tommaso's father." We held each other one last time. Two mothers who walked together through war. One going to find her son. One going to bury hers. The jeep ride took 6 hours. North through the Arno Valley. Past burned-out villages and blown bridges. Past American supply convoys heading north toward the Gothic line where the fighting continued. Past German POWs marching south, guarded by MPs. The war wasn't over. But for me, for this one moment, it paused. The field hospital was a converted school building on the outskirts of Florence. White tents in the courtyard, red crosses painted on everything, the sound of generators and the smell of antiseptic. A nurse met me at the entrance. American. Red cross on her helmet. Tired eyes. "Mrs. Moretti?" "Yes, I'm Lieutenant Anderson. Your son is in Ward C. He's stable, but..." She paused. "He's been through significant trauma. Physical and psychological. I understand. I didn't understand anything. I just needed to see him." She led me through corridors filled with wounded. American soldiers with bandaged heads. British soldiers with missing limbs. Italian civilians with infections and malnutrition. The cost of liberation visible in every bed. We reached Ward C. 20 beds. Thin Italian boys in all of them. Former forced laborers recovering from months of starvation and abuse. Third bed on the left. Lieutenant Anderson said quietly. I walked forward. Each step felt like walking through water. And then I saw him. Marco. My son. My boy. He was asleep. So thin I could see every bone in his face. His hands on the blanket were scraped and scarred. His hair was shaved short. Lice, probably. Bruises fading to yellow on his arms. But alive. Breathing. Real. I stood beside his bed. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. 8 months of searching, of walking, of praying, of not knowing. It all crashed over me at once. My legs gave out. I collapsed beside his bed, holding the metal frame to keep from falling completely. The sound woke him. His eyes opened, confused at first, then focusing, then widening. Mama? His voice was different. Rougher, older, but still his. Marco. He tried to sit up. I stopped him. Don't move. Rest. You came. He was crying. You came for me. Of course I came. Did you think I wouldn't? The Germans said nobody would. They said everyone forgot about us. I never forgot. Not for 1 second. I held his hand. It was all bones and calluses. The hand of a boy who'd been forced to do a man's work in hell. Lieutenant Anderson appeared with a chair. I sat without letting go of Marco's hand. How did you find me? He asked. So I told him. Every kilometer walked. Every person asked. Every day searching. Signora Caruso walking beside me. The American soldiers who helped. The lieutenant from Brooklyn. The processing center. The captain who found his records. Marco listened. Tears running down his too thin face. When I finished, he said, Tommaso? I couldn't lie. He didn't make it. Pneumonia in August. Marco closed his eyes. He talked about his mother every day. Every single day. He said she made the best pasta in Valmontone. He wanted to taste it again. We sat in silence, the weight of Signora Caruso's loss hanging between us. Finally, Marco spoke again. There were 20 boys from our village in that truck. I'm the only one coming home. I know. Why me? Why did I survive when they didn't? I don't know. It's not fair. No, it's not. There are no good answers, just survival and loss, and the randomness of which mother's son comes home. A doctor appeared. American, captain's bars, kind eyes. Mrs. Moretti? I'm Captain Walsh. Your son is going to be fine. Another week of rest and good food and we can discharge him? Thank you. Thank you for saving him. We just provided the medical care, ma'am. You're the one who saved him. He told the nurses his mother was coming. He said you'd never give up. That belief kept him alive. After the doctor left, Marco squeezed my hand. Papa? Waiting for you. He hasn't spoken much since they took you, but he'll speak again when you come home. And Sophia and Enzo? His younger siblings. Safe. Hungry, but safe. Waiting to see their big brother. Marco smiled for the first time. A ghost of the smile I remembered. We sat together until he fell asleep again. I didn't let go of his hand. I wouldn't let go for days. Lieutenant Anderson brought me coffee. Real American coffee, strong and hot. You can stay as long as you like, ma'am. We'll set up a cot. Thank you. Ma'am? What you did. Walking hundreds of kilometers through a war zone to find your son. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. I shook my head. It wasn't bravery. It was just being a mother. Maybe that's the same thing. Maybe. Maybe not. I just knew I couldn't stop. Couldn't give up. Couldn't accept not knowing. Some of us got our sons back. Some didn't. The war made those choices random and cruel. But we never stopped searching. Over the next week, I watched Marco slowly return to himself. The food helped. The Americans fed him small meals every few hours. Real food. Meat, vegetables, bread, fruit. Things we hadn't seen in years. His body healed faster than his mind. He had nightmares. Screaming in his sleep about cave-ins and artillery and German guards who beat anyone too weak to work. Lieutenant Anderson said it was normal. Shell shock, she called it. It takes time. How much time? How do you measure the time it takes to forget what you were forced to become? Other mothers arrived. 3 more from villages near Valmontone, searching for their sons. 2 found them in the ward. 1 didn't. We formed a circle. Mothers who understood, who'd walked the same roads, who'd asked the same questions. The one who didn't find her son sat with us anyway. She had nowhere else to go. On the 8th day, Captain Walsh cleared Marco for discharge. Take him home, Mrs. Moretti. Let him heal there. The army provided transport. A truck convoy heading south with wounded soldiers returning to rear hospitals. Marco and I rode in the back, surrounded by American boys with bandaged heads and missing limbs, all heading home or as close to home as war allows. The contrast struck me again. These American soldiers would go home to a country untouched by bombs, to houses still standing, to fields not seeded with mines, to mothers who hadn't spent 8 months walking through hell to find them. We had nothing to go home to except ruins and survival. But Marco was alive. That was everything. The truck dropped us in Valmontone just after sunset on September 29th, 1944, 4 months since the Germans took him. A lifetime compressed into 120 days. Giuseppe was standing in the road. He must have been standing there for hours, waiting. The moment he saw Marco climbing down from the truck, he made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a sob and a prayer. They held each other. Father and son, both crying, both alive. Sophia and Enzo ran from the house screaming Marco's name. We stood in the road, holding each other, while the American truck drove away into the dusk. We were home, but home was different now. 19 boys taken from our village. 1 returned. 18 families with empty chairs at empty tables. Signora Caruso's house stayed dark for weeks. The war continued. The Gothic line fighting dragged through fall into winter. American and British soldiers dying in the mountains to push the Germans another kilometer north. More mothers walking roads looking for sons who'd never come home. Marco started talking after a month. Small things at first. Memories of Valmontone before the war. questions about neighbors, stories about Sophia and Enzo that made him smile. He didn't talk about the months in German service. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That was his choice to make. What I knew? He survived. We found each other, against impossible odds, against all logic, against the machinery of war that grinds up sons and spits out ghosts. We won. But sitting in our kitchen that first night, eating thin soup by candlelight, I thought about the 18 other mothers in our village who didn't win, who never would. One question burned in my mind. The same question Marco asked in the hospital. Why us? October 1944. Valmontone, Italy. The sound of rain on our broken roof, water dripping into the tin bucket I placed in the corner. Marco sleeping in his old bed for the first time in 4 months. I can't sleep. I keep checking to make sure he's still breathing. Giuseppe said I need to stop watching Marco sleep. He says the boy needs space to heal. But how do I explain that every time I close my eyes, I see that empty truck driving away? The first weeks were the hardest. Marco would wake up screaming at 3 a.m., convinced he was still in a work camp near Casino. Giuseppe and I would hold him until the shaking stopped, until he remembered where he was, until he believed he was really home. It's okay, I'd whisper. You're safe now. But was he? Was any of us? The war was still happening. We could hear artillery in the mountains to the north, the Gothic Line, where Allied forces were grinding against German defensive positions. Every boom reminded us that boys were still dying, mothers were still searching. The machinery of destruction hadn't stopped. It had just moved past us. The village had changed. Or maybe we had. Everyone walked differently now. Heads down, shoulders hunched, like we were all carrying invisible weight. The piazza where German officers held their feast was empty, except for stray cats and bullet holes in the fountain. 18 families in mourning. One family with a son who came back. The resentment was subtle but real. Signora Bertelli, whose son Carlo died building tank traps near Arezzo, wouldn't look at me in church. Signor Russo, whose boy Davide was killed by Allied bombing while forced to repair roads, crossed the street when he saw Marco. They never said anything. They didn't have to. Giuseppe felt it too. They blame us, he said one night, for Marco surviving when their sons didn't. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, Lucia. He was right. Fairness died the day the Germans came. All that remained was survival and guilt, and the impossible math of who lives and who doesn't. Marco noticed. Of course he noticed. One afternoon in early November, he asked, Mama, why does everyone look at me like that? I was kneading dough. Real flour, from American supplies distributed by the Allied military government. My hands kept working while I searched for words. They lost their sons. Seeing you reminds them of what they don't have anymore. So I should hide. Pretend I didn't survive? No. You should live. That's what their sons would want. Marco stared at the floor. Tommaso told me something. The night before he got sick. He said if only one of us made it home. We had to live for both. Live twice as hard. Make it mean something. My hand stopped. Did you promise him? Yes. Then keep that promise. But how do you live twice as hard when you can barely live once? Marco tried. God knows he tried. He helped Giuseppe repair our roof. He played with Sophia and Enzo. He smiled when neighbors were watching, but I saw the truth, the way his hands shook when trucks drove past, the way he flinched at loud noises, the way he stared at nothing for hours. Lieutenant Anderson had been right. His body was healing. His mind was still at war. In December, the priest organized a memorial service for the 19 boys taken from Valmontone. 18 dead. 1 survivor. The families gathered in the damaged church. The Germans had stripped the bronze bells and most of the artwork before retreating. Marco didn't want to go. I can't face them, Mama. You have to. They need to see you're honoring their sons too. How? By being alive? By remembering. By carrying their stories. He went. We all did. The priest read each name. Carlo Bertelli, Davide Russo, Tommaso Caruso. 16 more. Boys who'd never come home. Boys who'd become men in German work camps and died before they could become anything else. When he finished, he asked if anyone wanted to speak. Marco stood up. Every head turned. The church went silent except for the winter wind through the broken windows. I knew them all, Marco said. His voice was quiet but steady. Carlo taught me to fish. Davide could fix any machine. Tommaso talked about his mother's cooking every single day. He paused, swallowed hard. They didn't die for anything noble. They didn't die for Italy or for freedom or for any cause. They died because they were worked until their bodies gave out. Because the Germans didn't care if we lived or died. Because we were just tools to them. Someone in the crowd gasped. You didn't say things like that out loud. Not yet. The war was still too close. But Marco kept going. I survived because of luck. Nothing more. I got extra rations one day because a guard was in a good mood. I avoided pneumonia because I slept near a stove. I was in the truck that went to Arezzo instead of staying at Cassino where the artillery was worse. That's all. Just luck. His voice cracked. So if you're angry that I'm here, and your sons aren't, I understand. I'm angry too. Every single day I'm angry that I'm alive and Tommaso isn't. That I can see my mother and Carlo can't see his. That I get to grow old while Davide stays 16 forever. Tears were running down his face now, but I made them a promise. I promised to live, for all of us, and I'm going to keep that promise even though I don't know how. He sat down. The church stayed silent for a long moment. Then Signora Bertelli stood up, walked across the aisle, put her hand on Marco's shoulder. My Carlo would have been proud to call you his friend, she said. One by one, the other mothers did the same. Touched his shoulder, squeezed his hand, said their sons' names out loud and asked Marco to remember. He promised he would. That night something shifted. The guilt didn't disappear. I don't think it ever would. But Marco started carrying it differently. Like a weight he'd accepted rather than one crushing him. The contrast was everywhere. While we mourned our 19 boys, the Allied armies were pushing toward Germany. Every day the BBC reported German cities being bombed, divisions surrendering, territory liberated. The end was visible now, even if still months away. But in Valmontone, the war had already ended. We were just learning to live in what came after. Christmas 1944 was strange. The Americans delivered emergency rations, canned turkey, powdered potatoes, chocolate bars for the children. More food than we'd seen in 3 years. We tried to celebrate. Sophia and Enzo sang carols. Giuseppe found wine hidden in the cellar. Marco smiled. But Tommaso's chair was empty at the Caruso house. Carlo's place at the Bertelli table was vacant. 18 empty chairs in 18 homes across our village. How do you celebrate when half your neighbors are mourning? You do it anyway. Because life insists. Because children need to believe in something beyond death and destruction. Because giving up would mean the war won. So we sang. We ate. We pretended things would be normal again. Marco pulled me aside that night. Mama, I need to tell you something. His face was serious. Too serious for a 16-year-old. What is it? The things I saw. The things the Germans made us do. I need to write it down. Before I forget. Before time makes it fuzzy. Marco, you don't have to. Yes, I do. For Tommaso and Carlo and all of them. Someone needs to remember exactly what happened. Someone needs to tell the truth. So he wrote. Every night through that winter, by candlelight, Marco filled notebook pages with memories. The forced marches, the starvation rations, the guards who beat anyone too weak to work. The boys who died of treatable illnesses because the Germans provided no medical care. The truth was ugly. But he wrote it anyway. Giuseppe didn't want him to. Let it go, he'd say. Focus on living, not on the dead. I am living, Marco would answer. This is how I live. I understood. The writing was his way of keeping his promise. Of making their deaths mean something by ensuring they weren't forgotten. In January 1945, the Allied offensive on the Gothic Line stalled in winter snow. The Americans dug in. The Germans dug in. Men died in frozen mud for positions that wouldn't matter in 3 months when the spring offensive started, but we didn't know that yet. We only knew the boom of artillery hadn't stopped. Marco started helping other families. Signora Caruso needed her roof repaired. Marco spent 3 days fixing it. The Russo family had no one to plow their field. Marco borrowed Giuseppe's ox and did it himself. The Bertelli's well was contaminated. Marco cleaned it. He never asked for payment, never expected thanks. I'm just keeping my promise, he'd say when I asked why. The village noticed. Slowly, week by week, the resentment faded. Not entirely. Grief doesn't work that way. But enough. Enough that people nodded to Marco in the street. Enough that mothers invited him to dinner to hear stories about their sons. Enough that he stopped being the boy who survived and became the boy who remembered. In February, an American Jeep arrived in Valmontone. The same lieutenant from Brooklyn who'd helped me at the processing center climbed out. "Mrs. Moretti? I was passing through on my way north. Wanted to see how your son was doing. I invited him in. Made him coffee from American rations. Introduced him to Marco. They talked for an hour. About the work camps. About survival. About guilt and promises and learning to carry weight you never asked for. Before he left, the lieutenant gave Marco something. A small notebook. These are the names of every Italian laborer we processed through Caserta. 473 men. These are the ones who made it. I thought you might want to know you weren't alone." Marco held the notebook like it was sacred. "Thank you. You did good, kid. Keep doing good." After he left, Marco opened the notebook, ran his finger down the list of names, stopped at one entry. Moretti, Marco. Age 16. Valmontone. 473 who survived. How many thousands didn't? How many names would never be written down because nobody knew them, nobody recorded them, nobody cared? Marco added them to his own notebook. Every name he could remember from the camps. Every boy from every village who died without a memorial service or a gravestone or a mother to mourn them. "Someone has to remember," he said. Spring came slowly to central Italy. The fields greened. The Gothic Line offensive resumed in April. The Germans retreated. The Americans advanced. The end was visible now. Everyone could feel it. On April 29, 1945, the priest's radio announced that Mussolini had been executed by partisans. 3 days later, Hitler was dead. On May 8th, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Valmontone celebrated in the piazza. People crying and laughing and drinking the last of the hidden wine. Church bells ringing. The Americans had returned them after finding them in a German warehouse. But the celebration felt hollow. Yes, the war was over. Yes, we'd survived. But at what cost? 19 boys gone. Hundreds of thousands dead across Italy. Cities destroyed. Families shattered. An entire generation scarred. Marco didn't celebrate. He sat in our kitchen adding names to his notebook. "It's over," I told him. "You can rest now." "Is it? Is it really over?" He was right to ask. The fighting had stopped, but the war's shadow would stretch across decades. How do you rebuild a country when every family has empty chairs? How do you trust neighbors who collaborated? How do you forgive enemies who showed no mercy? These were questions bigger than a 16-year-old boy from a farming village should have to ask. But the war had made him ask them anyway. Summer 1945 brought displaced persons flooding back through Valmontone. Freed prisoners, demobilized soldiers, refugees looking for homes that no longer existed. All of them had stories. All of them had lost something. Marco talked to everyone, collected their stories, added their names to his notebook. People started calling him Il Custode, the keeper, the boy who remembered what everyone else wanted to forget. In June, a journalist from Rome visited. He'd heard about Marco's notebooks, about the boy who survived and made it his mission to record every name, every story, every truth that others wanted to bury. "May I see them?" the journalist asked. Marco hesitated. These notebooks were sacred to him. "Personal. They're not just yours anymore," I told him. "They belong to everyone whose name is in there. They deserve to be known." So Marco shared them. The journalist published an article in Il Messaggero. "The Boy Who Remembers. One survivor's mission to honor the forgotten dead of Mussolini's war." Letters arrived. Dozens, then hundreds. Mothers asking if Marco knew their sons. Widows searching for husbands. Sisters looking for brothers. All of them hoping he'd written down one more name, one more story, one more proof that their loved ones had existed and mattered. Marco answered every letter. Sometimes he had information. More often he didn't, but he always answered. "They need to know someone cares," he explained. "Even if I can't give them what they want, they need to know someone tried." By autumn, Marco's notebooks had grown to 7 volumes, thousands of names, hundreds of stories. a record of what happened to Italy's forgotten sons in the final desperate months of a losing war. The new Italian government, struggling to establish legitimacy after fascism's collapse, took notice. In November, an official from Rome arrived with an offer. Donate the notebooks to the National Archives. Make them part of Italy's official historical record. Marco refused. These aren't Italy's stories, he said. They're personal. They belong to the families, not the government. The official was frustrated. But they're historically important. They're people, not history. People with names and mothers and lives. I won't let you turn them into statistics. Giuseppe was proud. I was terrified. You don't say no to government officials, not in Italy, not even in a democracy. But Marco held firm. Instead, he did something smarter. He made copies, sent them to churches in every village mentioned in the stories. Let the local priests maintain them. Let the communities remember their own dead. The notebook stayed with Marco. His burden, his promise, his life's work. In December 1945, Signora Caruso asked me to visit. She looked older. The year had aged all of us. But she smiled when she opened the door. I wanted to thank you, she said. For what? For searching. For walking with me. For not giving up when I wanted to. Because of you, I know what happened to Tommaso. Marco wrote it down. Every detail. Where he died. What his last words were. The friend who buried him. She showed me Marco's entry. Tommaso Caruso. Age 16. Valmontone. Died August 14, 1944 near Cassino. Pneumonia. Buried by Luca Bianchi from Ferentino. Last words. Tell my mother I love her and I'll save her a seat in heaven. He remembered. Signora Caruso whispered. My boy won't be forgotten. That's when I understood what Marco was really doing. He wasn't just keeping a promise to his dead friends. He was giving their mothers what I'd had. The chance to know. To stop wondering. To stop walking roads looking for sons who'd never come home. Knowledge didn't ease the pain. But it ended the uncertainty. And sometimes that was enough. Christmas 1945 was different. Still somber. The empty chairs hadn't filled, but lighter somehow. The war was over. Reconstruction was beginning. American aid was arriving. We could see a future again, even if we couldn't quite believe in it yet. Marco turned 17 in January 1946. He looked older, much older. The war had stolen his childhood and replaced it with responsibilities no teenager should carry. But he was alive. He was healing. He was keeping his promise. Giuseppe and I watched him grow into someone we barely recognized. Not our little boy anymore. A young man with purpose and pain, and a mission that would define his entire life. Do you regret searching for him? Giuseppe asked me one night. Knowing what he'd become? Knowing the weight he'd carry? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said finally, because the alternative was not knowing. And that would have destroyed me. In March 1946, the first anniversary of Valmontone's liberation, the village held a ceremony. A memorial stone in the piazza listing all 19 names. The families gathered. The priest said prayers. Marco read from his notebooks. Not the horrible parts, the human parts. Carlo's laugh, Davide's skill with machinery, Tommaso's dreams of becoming a teacher. All the little details that made them people, instead of names on stone. When he finished, something remarkable happened. The mothers stood, one by one, and they thanked him. Not for surviving, for remembering. That night, Marco came to me with tears in his eyes. Mama, I think I kept my promise. I think Tommaso would be proud. I held my son. My impossible, surviving, heartbroken son. He would be, I said. They all would be. The years passed. Marco's mission continued. He corresponded with families across Italy. He visited camps where boys had died. He interviewed survivors. He built a memorial, not of stone but of stories. Thousands of them. All meticulously recorded, all carefully preserved. In 1950, he enrolled at the University of Rome, history program. Nobody was surprised. In 1955, he published his first book, I Dimenticati, The Forgotten Ones, the stories of Italy's forced laborers under German occupation. In 1960, He married a girl from Frosinone. They had 3 children. In 1970, his work was finally recognized by the Italian government, not with archives or statistics, with a medal for preserving memory. He kept writing, kept collecting stories, kept adding names to notebooks that eventually filled an entire room in his house. Giuseppe died in 1972, heart failure. At the funeral, Marco spoke. Papa taught me that some silences are louder than words. But he also taught me that the right words at the right time can change everything. I hope I've found those words. I live to see my grandchildren, to see Marco's books in libraries, to see memorials erected in villages across central Italy, all of them using Marco's research. I lived to see the war become history instead of memory. Before I died in 1981, Marco asked me one final question. Mama, would you walk those roads again? Knowing what came after, I didn't hesitate. Every kilometer, every day, every moment, 1,000 times over. Why? Because you're my son, and mothers don't give up, ever. He held my hand. I wouldn't be here without you, and 19 families wouldn't have their stories without you. We saved each other, Marco. That's what mothers and sons do. I was Lucia Moretti, a mother who searched, a woman who walked through war to find her son, a survivor who learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to stop hoping. Marco is still alive today. He's 86 years old, still writing, still collecting stories, still keeping promises to boys who died 80 years ago. His notebooks are in museums now. His books are required reading in Italian schools. His name is synonymous with memory and truth, but I knew him when he was just a scared 16-year-old who needed his mother to find him in the darkness. And I did. That's what mothers do. We walk through fire. We search impossible distances. We never give up. We refuse to let our children be forgotten, because love is stronger than war, and memory is how we win. This story matters because these mothers, these sons, these promises, they all happened. History isn't just dates and battles. It's people. Real people with names and families and stories that deserve to be told. If this moved you, hit that subscribe button. Smash the like. And in the comments, tell me, whose story from history should we never forget? Drop a name. Let's remember them together. Because that's how we honor the ones who walked through hell so we wouldn't have to. See you in the next one.